Tarawa 1943 is a solo game where the player is the US Marines attempting to infiltrate the Japanese-controlled island of Tarawa during World War II. It's a game utilising dice with Yahtzee-like mechanisms to resolve battles. There's also card play to assist in your efforts of taking the island over. And the Japanese in this game, the AI, are driven by very similar systems to yourself. The box says victory in under an hour, and half of that is true. The game does play in under an hour. Victory though? Good luck. Let's check out how the game's played. The goal for the US in this game is to control all enemy occupied positions on the island and minimise their losses as best as possible, which the US will start with their battalions of 3 green blocks each in the waves here off to the south of the map. And as they eliminate the yellow Japanese blocks on the island through attacks, the US can move in to occupy those island positions and take control of that space. As the game progresses and the US continue to move, advance and attack, they will obviously get the opportunity to control more spaces on the island, therefore increasing their odds of a win. The attack option available to the US player will be one of the most common options they will want to participate in. In fact, I can't think of a single turn in the game where I haven't wanted to do an attack option, but like any good game, you'll have to prioritise. There's a few reasons you'll want to lay down your guns at times, which I'll cover those a little bit later on. But let's start off with attacks and have a look at how they work. When the US take an attack action with a battalion, they'll first have to reduce that battalion's cohesion marker on the matching battalion's track here first. Each battalion and regiment is numbered on their blocks and matches one of these tracks. To attack, the US battalion then rolls 5 dice. On the board it states what the results will equate to, and it's very easily remembered because you'll be doing this a lot. Double 6s will remove 1 Japanese marker, double 5s will do the same. Each 4 is immediately removed and cannot be re-rolled. Each 3 is immediately re-rolled. Double 2s reduce the battalion's cohesion by 1, and double 1s remove 1 marker from the US battalion. Now you can elect to keep some dice aside after your first roll, and you can re-roll undesirable dice as many times as you'd like in order to attempt to gain a better result. However, every time you re-roll, you reduce that battalion's cohesion again by another 1 point, and you risk locking out more dice on the result of a 4 as well. Okay, I'm going to show you a US attack action in play. We've got this battalion attacking this Japanese unit over here. We're going to roll 5 dice for the attack action, but first we have to lower their cohesion by 1. Rolling 5 dice, let's see what we get. Ooh, it's not very good. We get a 6. I'm going to want to keep that, but I'm going to want to re-roll all these. So I'm going to lower the cohesion because none of these dice mean anything. Let's go for it. Let's re-roll. Okay, we get a 3, which is automatically re-rolled. The other 2s are just going to sit there. The 4 is now locked out. So I'm going to lower the cohesion to re-roll these 3s again. Well, let's see. We need at least a 6. Oh, we get a 6. That's 1 hit. I don't want to lower the cohesion anymore. So I'm just going to cut my losses and be happy with that 1 hit there and remove 1 Japanese block from that unit as a result. Typically with 5 dice, the ultimate goal would be 2 hits, with a good probability of getting at least 1. So there's a fun push your luck element as you're aiming for those 5s and 6s to get those 2 hits. And it can be done, it's not so far out of reach to get those 2 hits. But as you keep re-rolling, that cohesion track will keep going down, and if the marker reaches the orange spaces here, 1 to 5, the unit will have to make an exhaustion check when taking further actions. In that case, they roll a die, and if it's under their current exhaustion level, they complete the action they chose, just as desired, no problems. If the exhaustion check is over though, they can only complete regroup or participate in rotate actions until they pass an exhaustion check, which I'll discuss those rotate and regroup options very shortly. If the cohesion level were to drop lower than level 1, a block is lost from that battalion for each level it would have fallen below 1. So keep that in mind. Low cohesion can result in losses and reduce gameplay options to the US player for those exhausted battalions. And the Japanese in their turn may also have cards that target those low cohesion battalions in attack. So things can go from bad to worse very quickly if a battalion has low cohesion. Now the US player in their turn will draw cards and they have a hand limit of 3. They can play one of these cards in their turn and then complete one action. The cards can do a variety of things to assist the US player. You might be able to activate 3 battalions to take actions this turn instead of just 1, add additional dice to attacks, increase that battalion's cohesion. They're quite varied. Some cards can even be played on the Japanese turn, and those cards are noted as such. The total action choices available to the US are as follows: attack, which we've covered a little of already, regroup, rotate battalions, move, or place a new wave. Regroup, you'll add 3 cohesion points to that battalion's track, which is pretty simple and easy to understand why you'd want to do this at times to keep your units from being exhausted. The move option costs 1 cohesion and enables you to move 1 space to an unoccupied adjacent position on the board. Again, easy to understand why this is important to capture those island spaces. Rotate is an interesting option. The lined arrows on the board indicate what spaces are adjacent to others, a useful marking for attacks, movement and rotation. With rotation, let's say this battalion here only have 1 block left and are low on cohesion, and in fact they're exhausted, which is what that red cube indicates. I want to get them off the front line. So I can rotate this full battalion that's untouched into this space and move this exhausted battalion further back to recuperate later on. And obviously, they're more out of harm's way. This is very useful in your attempt to minimize losses. Completing this action will lower one of the 2 battalions' cohesion by 1. Generally, you'd want it to be the battalion with the higher cohesion at the time of the rotation. Next option is place a new wave. There's 2 units that start off the board and you can bring them into play. You place them in vacant wave positions and then they're ready for action. Advances are another thing I want to cover. If I eliminate an adjacent enemy unit completely in an attack, I can advance into that space with the attacking battalion. It's sort of a free move, but there's also a daisy chain effect. An adjacent battalion can follow up the advancing one, and this will be utilised a lot as it can really assist in taking those island positions over a lot faster. Let's talk about the Japanese AI and how they work. Once you've drawn cards, played a card or cards, and then taken an action, the Japanese AI will act. They draw a card from the AI deck and it's played out. The AI is mostly going to fire attack against the highest priority position, which each space is numbered. The highest priority space is red beach 1 here. Lowest priority is 9 over here. When they attack, they roll 3 dice and consult their own chart on the board. Each 6 will remove a marker from the US battalion. Each 5 will reduce the cohesion of that battalion. Each 4 will do the same. Each 3 will be re-rolled immediately, and a 2 will cancel out a 6 if rolled. So that's quite useful. Double 1s will remove a Japanese marker, and a single 1 will have no effect. So you can see cohesion losses as a result of incoming Japanese fire will be significant. Rolling a 6 and having a block removed is your worst case scenario here, but a 2 and a 6, well, you gotta love when that happens. The Japanese do have other events on the cards, but most are going to be attacks. They also have bonsai attacks, which roll on a different chart and they're more likely to roll 4 or 5 dice as opposed to 3. This chart is very similar to their fire attacks. However, for every single one, a Japanese marker is removed from that position. Gather around, friends, and let me tell you of the time the Japanese attacked me with a bonsai attack and rolled 3 1s. They wiped out an entire one of their units in one hit. It was fucking hilarious. Now, there is a little more to the game. The Japanese have infiltration cubes that can arrive in US positions on the island, taking control away from them, even if the US are present there at the time. There's bunkers that can be placed, which can reinforce areas from attack for both sides, so there's a little bit more to it. So this game for the US, it's not just as simple as taking the island over and winning. It's a victory point driven game, and these are how the victory points are awarded. For the US, they will receive 2 victory points per US controlled island position. They'll also receive 1 victory point per Japanese card remaining after the US have controlled all island positions. The Japanese will receive 2 victory points per US block eliminated. They'll also receive 1 victory point per US battalion exhausted. Then they'll receive 3 victory points for each Japanese controlled island position, which is huge. Without getting too into detail, if you've lost 9 blocks, that's 18 points for the AI. So you'll need to take the entire island to tie because that would equal 18 points for the US. There's 9 positions and 2 victory points each. If you don't take the island, that 3 victory points for every Japanese occupied position, of which there would obviously be some if you don't take it over, blows the scoring way out. Then the other scoring conditions just come in to hurt your ego. They're what I refer to as the Nelsons of victory point conditions. The problem with this for me is when you lose 9 blocks, it's easy to see what the outcome's going to be. So halfway through the game, you can get to a point where you know you're not going to be able to win. I should mention there is a detailed scoring pad included in the game. It includes battalion losses and there's a lot of information that you can keep track of, so you can try and beat your prior attempts, which is a nice feature, and that shouldn't be left out of the conversation here. But regardless, the victory points, in my humble opinion, which can't be that humble if I'm, putting it out there to the internet, but I feel that the victory point conditions are too in favour of the opposition. Taking the island itself for the US is not going to be an easy feat, but to do so with losing less than 9 blocks is incredibly hard. And I'm going to put this out there. If you've won this game, come on, luck has played a major part. I don't think anyone is going to deny that. I bet they're like, yeah, I did win the game, but yeah, I rolled pretty well that game. It's just part of it. There is an easier variant where you can play with a larger Japanese deck of cards, so you'll have more turns to achieve your goal, because when the Japanese deck runs out or when the US take control of the island, that signifies the end of the game. So more turns, that's more opportunity to take the island over. However, it also means more Japanese turns and more opportunity for the Japanese AI to take actions and eliminate more of your units. Maybe some pre-chosen held cards where you could bring them into play with cohesion drops. Something like that might have been a better option for easier games, because I don't feel like more cards really equates to an easier game at all. But that's just about all I didn't like about the game. The victory point conditions. But what about the gameplay? The gameplay is a lot of fun, and I continue to punish myself to achieve a win in this game. I've not done it yet. The best I've got so far is a tie, but I love the ease of access of this game. It's just fantastic. There is a decent amount of luck in the game, but obviously with the dice, but luck in solo games I think is fairly important to have. I like knowing what my opponent is capable of, but not exactly what will happen. And by looking at those attack charts, I can see what the best and worst outcome could be. But it's not until I roll those dice that I'll be certain of what result has transpired. And it's a nice way to emulate that mystery of an opponent's decisions. And it can create some really enjoyable moments where things go really well, or in some cases really bad. For a solo game, for me personally, I find it hard to for it to completely capture my attention when I'm playing it. That's not always the case. More complex games break it with rule citations. Less complex games are usually lacking in engaging choices. And this seems to be like a really happy medium. I'm definitely engaged in this one. Now, I'm coming off about 38 days straight work, long hours. I do physical labour. It's been an unusually chaotic time for me. And so when I get home, I can have this set up, throw a few dice, and feel like I've escaped momentarily, winding down that little bit. Next night after work, come back, knock out a few more turns. And because the board at a glance is so easy to absorb, it's easy to take a break from and return to and know exactly where you were the previous night. Decision-wise, as I mentioned, you're nearly always going to want to attack, but you'll look at things and be like, well, I've got to get this battalion out of here. This cohesion needs to be lifted. You'll make quick decisions as a result of the rule set, but meaningful ones nonetheless. The AI will present you with a number of problems that you'll need to address. To me, given its laid-back rule set and the gameplay, and also the ease of access, it makes me refer to this as the Memoir 44 of solo war games. Now, the components are brilliant. The rulebook is well put together. Personally, I think it overcomplicates AI prioritization, though. Until I watched a video, I was like, this is what the rulebook was trying to say. And given some AI cards and certain in-game situations that might arise in positioning, sometimes prioritization is a little bit confusing. That was my experience, at least. There is a historical book as well that covers the history, and it's very detailed and absolutely excellent. I love that in my war games. You can set up the battalions as well in this game in a historical layout, which is a nice feature, but it has no in-game effect, and I'd be curious to see what could be achieved if there was in-game effects there, where certain battalion had cards that only affected them specifically, because that could see some interesting strategies play out as a result of choices during setup. So look, I'd be keen to get any other titles that were proposed with this same system, particularly World War II. I think the mechanics here are a good tight fit, just a lot of fun. So overall, it's a tough game, punishes me every time. I never feel like I am going to win. I never get as lucky as I should. It's brutal, one-sided, but I keep coming back for more. It's basically the marriage of solo war games, but fun.